Good morning. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Paula Berman. I'm Director of Admissions at the Boston Graduate School of Psychoanalysis. And I want to welcome those who have logged in and signed in with us today to hear more about our school and our programs, I should say. We really like people to participate as much as they might be comfortable doing so. And if you do have a question and feel comfortable asking it, please feel free to do that. But some people don't feel comfortable doing that in this format, and I just want to draw your attention to the chat box. And you can ask a question online, type it in, and I'll address it that way. But whichever way you're most comfortable, we would welcome your participation. So what I'm going to do first is talk a little bit about the school in general, who we are, what we do, why we're here. And then I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Soldz, who is the program director of our newly formed social justice program. And after Dr. Soldz presents that program to you and answers questions you may have, I'm going to then introduce you to Dr. Benson, who's going to talk about our clinical programs. Then I'll wrap it up with talking more about the admissions process, and once again, will make myself available to answer any questions you might have. So I guess, unless anyone wants to say anything now, I'll just start, and hopefully you're following along with the slides as I'm going through them. So first of all, some people think we haven't been around for a long time, but we have. We were founded in 1973, and our mission since 1973 right through to today and moving forward has been very focused, has not really changed. It really represents who we are. So our mission at BGSP is to use our understanding of unconscious dynamics, keyword there, unconscious dynamics, to help solve problems of emotional suffering and destructive action. In this way, we help individuals, groups, and communities free their creative energy to live satisfying lives in cooperation with others. I think as you hear more about our specific programs today, you'll see how they all fit right under this mission statement. This is an umbrella statement that covers all our programs, both clinical and non-clinical. As a graduate school, we teach students to actualize this personally and professionally by bringing psychoanalysis to bear on individual, social, and cultural problems. Other than our mission, which I think does really differentiate us from the bulk of maybe some other schools you might be looking at, we also are differentiated by the fact that we're actually a rather small school. We have small classes, and our students have very close ties to the faculty. In fact, the student-to-faculty ratio is about 2.5 to 1. So this is a place that many people say feels like home. It feels like a community. It's a place that you're a little bit more known than you might be in a larger school. So when considering your educational options, you might want to think about whether this is the type of place that would feel like home to you. We have a very diverse student body. I guess I'll mention what's here now. People of color, 29%, international, 22%, which I think is interesting. But what I think is actually what really helps us become the vibrant community that we are is that we have people from all ages. We have people who are just coming out of their undergraduate work. We have people who've been doing clinical work for many years and have decided to join us. We have people who have been lawyers or engineers or artists, and they, after a career in that field, have decided to come and join us. So it's a very eclectic group. We have people from, as you can see, international, but we also have people from all over the country. And what brings us all together is our interest and our passion for understanding what makes people tick. What are the unconscious dynamics that make people do what they do? So it's not going to be a typical classroom where everyone's kind of going to look the same and be the same age and come from the same background. That isn't who we're about. We're about diversity. We're about bringing different minds and different people together to study people. So that's another unique thing about us. So let me give a general overview of the two general categories that we have in terms of the degree programs that we offer. And once I kind of lay that out, then we'll get more specific under each category. First, I'll mention the clinical program, and that really is at the core of who we are. These are training programs that focus on individual and group dynamics leading to practice in mental health counseling, that's at the master's level, or clinical psychoanalysis, and that's at the doctoral level. So that's sort of the clinical program in a nutshell. And as I mentioned, Dr. Benson is going to be getting into more detail in terms of the specific programs. In the social consciousness category, which are the non-clinical, which underneath that reside the non-clinical programs, these are basically interdisciplinary programs that focus on social and cultural dynamics leading to practice in human rights and social change organizations. I believe actually there are people joining us today who are interested in, some are interested in the clinical and some are interested in the social consciousness program. So we'll divide our time up between the two. Even though on this slide I mentioned the clinical first, I want to actually introduce Dr. Soldz, who is, as I mentioned, the director of the social justice program, and he's going to walk you through all of our social consciousness programs today. Dr. Soldz?
Hi, I'm Stephen Soldz. I'm glad to be with you. I want to describe our two programs in this area. I'm actually going to go the bottom one first. Our older program, which actually goes back probably 20 years or so, is a program which currently is known as Psychoanalysis, Society, and Culture, in which we have both master's and doctoral degrees. This is a research and theoretical program, an interdisciplinary program integrating psychoanalytic thought with other sociocultural perspectives from sociology, anthropology, history, etc., to try and understand social and cultural phenomenon. So people in that program study literature, art, social movements, public attitudes, all with an emphasis both on understanding the sociocultural forces involved and the unconscious psychodynamics involved. So that's that program. As I said, we have a master's and doctorate in that. I'm the director of our new program, the Master's in Social Justice and Human Rights, which is, as far as we know, unique in the country. And there are a few other master's programs in social justice, but the focus of this one is somewhat different. So you learn about fundamental principles of social analysis, how to analyze social phenomenon, say homelessness or domestic violence as two examples, how to bring together knowledge from a wide variety of disciplines, from psychology, sociology, and psychoanalysis, law, etc. So principles of social analysis, principles of social change, and we are interested in both social change as brought about within and by more formal institutions, basically nonprofit sector to a great degree, government policy, and social change brought about by grassroots movements. And we have faculty with many decades of experience in both of those. So what is unique about the program is that there's also an emphasis on psychoanalysis, and the reason why that fits in is it helps understand the obstacles to successful advocacy and social change, the way in which individual, group, and organizational dynamics can either help or hinder success at change efforts. So this program was designed with the job market and as a very practical program. So the way it is a new program, so but the way we conceptualize it is it's for people primarily who are going to interested in jobs and careers in the nonprofit sector. That's probably the largest part of it. In government agencies, especially around sort of policy agencies, say the Department of Public Health or a Department of Mental Health, in policy-making organizations, and also grassroots organizations and movements. So we visualize it as for several groups, recent college graduates who are looking to have jobs involving social change. For example, one person I spoke to was interested in developing domestic violence programs in an African country, and had realized from the experience she had that it required a lot of understanding to not cause harm while you were trying to help people, and felt that you needed the kind of broad interdisciplinary perspective that we would provide in order to do that successfully. There are obviously individuals who are seeking further education, who are already working in the field, and others interested in other types of relationships and of trying to improve social change and social justice efforts. So I've covered some of this. We teach fundamental principles of social justice and human rights. And I think what we don't have on here, because I conceptualized it since then, is social analysis as a particular part of it, and a focus on social change strategies, both in organizations and in movements. And that focus on change strategies is also, I think, a rather unique focus for the small number of social justice programs. The emphasis on the unconscious influences on social behavior and group resistances to change, and also how psychodynamics can help change as well. Examining psychodynamic and social dynamics around gender, race, psychopathology, social violence, and social systems, and developing tools for successful and effective activism, developing policies, and organizational leadership. And we expect that many of our students will become leaders in change efforts. Okay, I'm the director. I'm a psychoanalyst, a researcher, and been an activist for human rights for many years, and also, I'll say, worked in many nonprofit and community-based organizations in many capacities, as a clinician and as a program evaluator and administrator. And so understand the functioning of community organizations and policy-making organizations. I've consulted to government governments at the federal, state, and municipal level in a number of places. The school has a seasoned psychoanalytic faculty that teach principles of unconscious dynamics, and in this program there'll be especially a focus on group dynamics and organizational dynamics and how psychodynamics play out in those contexts. We have, for the program, we have a faculty, an amazing faculty, I think, drawn from a wide variety of relevant social, behavioral sciences, humanities, law, and we have an extensive advisory board many of whom are clamoring to get involved in various ways and are resources. For example, on the advisory board are a couple of filmmakers who, if students are interested in doing a film as their master's project, would be interested in helping with that and have skill and knowledge and mentoring for that. The faculty are all leaders academically and all have various types of involvement with social change and our advocacy efforts. Let me just tell you about a faculty member. He's someone who has just finishing a career as a turnaround specialist for the public sector. He goes into public agencies that are failing, that are in trouble. Unfortunately, in Massachusetts, we have had more than our share of those, as well as in other states, and he turns them around, just like a turnaround specialist in the private sector. And he's going to teach our organizational leadership course, but he also has a 20-year history of interest in psychoanalysis. And so this is the kind of person we're interested in, someone with very strong practical experience and deep theoretical understanding. So the program, it's a 2-year program if taken full time. It was designed, among other things, to make students attractive to potential employers. That was in our mind as we designed it. So there are 2 semesters of hands-on experience of internship in some social justice or human rights agency. We have an internship coordinator who will work with you in trying to match student interests with various agencies in the Boston area. In order to get practical firsthand experience of psychodynamics, the first 3 semesters of the program, you would have this immersion. You would be in a group experience with your fellow students, where you would experience the psychodynamics that go on in groups firsthand. Then the 4th semester is more reflective, in reading group dynamics literature and reflecting back on the experience that you and your cohorts went through over those earlier semesters and how that relates to what the literature says about group dynamics. And then finally there's a master's project, which can be a traditional master's thesis research paper, but it can also be something that's more practical and that can be shown to potential employers. A proposal for a pilot program, an advocacy project such as a video or film, or the development of a website, possibly a grant application. So there's a number of options there. Okay, now Dr. Sue Benson is going to describe our clinical programs.
Good morning. We're very excited about Dr. Soldz' new program, so I hope people have some interest and are curious about what you might have heard.
Excuse me, may I just say one thing? Did you want to mention the scholarship study?
Dr. Berman is reminding me that I forgot to mention an important thing, which is that we have received a major grant from a donor, the Meyer Foundation, and several smaller grants from some wonderful people. to fund scholarships for the students in the first year of the social justice program. We're going to be able to fund scholarships up to 50% of the tuitions. That make it quite an affordable, and it's a major major thing that we have to offer people.
Hopefully that's a good incentive. So just give you a little bit of information about our clinical degrees. We have, as we're launching a new program in the social justice realm, we also are expanding some of our programs that we offer, but I'll give you sort of the nuts and bolts about some of the primary programs. And one of our more beginning programs is the Master's in Mental Health Counseling. And this leads directly to a license in Massachusetts. You would be, if following all the coursework and completing all the requirements, you can sit for the LMHC exam, which is what it's, the Licensed Mental Health Counselor exam in Massachusetts. So what makes our program a little bit unique is certainly our psychoanalytic focus. As Dr. Berman and Dr. Soldz have talked about, we are really looking at sort of deep understanding of our patients and ourselves. So we're really looking at how the unconscious informs behaviors and pathologies and all the things that are in the realm of human functioning. And we learn to deal with people at a much deeper level, and we're dealing with more primitive patients. So you could find there's many mental health counseling programs in the state, but we really have our infusion with the psychoanalytic element, which really sets us apart. Within that degree, you can specialize further. Excuse me. We have an addictions counseling specialization, and we have child and adolescent work. And again, if you're thinking about licensure, the addictions specialization can lead you to licensure at the LADAC level, which is the License in Alcohol and Drug Counseling. And that is a very good extra credential if people are really interested in working in the substance abuse field. So the child and adolescent work too is much more targeted. So you can be as broad as you want and meet state requirements, or you can be even more specialized and also get everything you need all in-house. But again, I think the thing that distinguishes us from other programs is our kind of our integrated approach to learning. We have an academic rigor, and we also have more of an emphasis on process learning, which is what we do in the classrooms in terms of understanding how all of these feelings that get stirred up in working with these primitive patients are affecting us as well as the patients. We don't really expect students to be able to do this very readily on their own, so we have a very dedicated and skilled faculty that are doing this exact thing in the community now. I mean, they're still having very thriving practices. They're dealing with all of these kinds of things that students are learning about. They have many years of training. And the other thing that comes with it is supervision. So you, from the start, you are in a supervised all of the patients that you're dealing with, and you start in group supervision, and that leads into individual supervision where you have just a one-on-one. I was going to say and the other thing that one person must need to be in, you have to be in a personal analysis throughout the whole training. So that certainly is unique. No other institution requires that. And people might sometimes think, why is that? But you are going to really be exposed to feelings and thoughts and concerns that you've really never been kind of affected by. So this helps you understand where this is all coming from. And we offer two, in addition to the specializations, we do offer two other distinct things, is that we put the students into the field very early. In the second semester, students begin a fieldwork placement where they're really sitting with patients that are very regressed. So they're getting primitive level of functioning and trying to understand what's going on with the patient, what's going on with them, and really getting at deep levels of pathology and some of these other things in terms of psychotic patients or people with borderline presentations and all of the things that are confusing when people are at beginning levels of training. And then we also add an additional internship. So students then have another layer of real practical training in the field, and they then take that with them before they can apply for the mental health license. But they really have early exposure, and they have a little bit more additional exposure than what you would get in another program in the state if you didn't come to BGSP. So moving on, we have the Master's in Psychoanalysis, and that is a very, you gain some clinical experience, you get psychodynamic orientation, but you do not, that program does not lead to a license. Sometimes we've had people start in the master's thinking that they don't want a license, and then upon further consideration, they decide that they do. So people can then sort of do some additional coursework and continue on, but initially it does not lead to a clinical degree. Excuse me, it does not lead to a clinical license. We have the CAGS, which stands for Certificate of an Advanced Graduate Study, and we have two delineations of that. We have one in the Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy, and then we have one in the Child and Adolescent Intervention. And these are for programs that are people that already have master's degrees. So you cannot come in just with the bachelor's degree. You have to have a master's level in some prior field, and you are getting some more intensified psychodynamic understanding of human behavior and how to work on these deep clinical levels. I think BGSP is becoming very skilled at trying to integrate a lot of these things. We find people from many different backgrounds and interests, and people want to do a lot of different things, so we're very flexible in trying to incorporate all of the things that people are looking for, we think, in a very integrated way. So I'm going to just stop for a moment. We have a question. What do I do with regressed patients in second semester? Can you give me a hint? So I'm not sure if you're talking about what would be happening in the second semester if you were. This is sort of a hypothetical, right? Like as if you were doing this. Well, you would be experiencing psychoanalytic process in a very direct way. So you would be having to sit with these feelings that were coming up and confusions and not understanding what was going on, not understanding what's coming from you, what's coming from the patient, and you begin to understand all of the concepts that come in psychoanalysis and some of the techniques that we use. And you certainly would be talking to your supervisor. And you also talk in class. We have very small classes, as Dr. Berman had mentioned, and you can talk about anything in those classes. So this is the process element of things. People are talking about, who they're sitting with and that they have no idea or that they feel uncomfortable. They don't want to go sit with these patients. They don't understand what you're supposed to be doing and why are we requiring this of you. But if you can tolerate it, you begin to these are the clues that sort of inform you about what's going on with the patient.
Dr. Benson, excuse me, do you want to talk a little bit about the fieldwork placement itself?
Yes, yeah.
Placed, how many hours a week?
That's true, right. So we find the placements for you, and they are often in, historically they used to be back in maybe group homes or nursing homes, and they're not, some of them still are, but they're in places that have very regressed patients, so more psychotic functioning patients, and that's kind of the gist of it. More community-based programs.
Yeah, and they're just about they work about 3-4 hours a week.
Yeah,
there.
Right. So we try to have you see as many patients as you can have, but you are there about 3 to 4 hours a week. And we, back in the older days, I'm not sure how they're doing it just now, but you would often just go and sit and you would wait for someone to approach you. So one of the techniques that we have is sort of this contact functioning. So we're waiting for the contact. We're waiting for someone to notice us and to approach us. And this is often how sometimes a person would become your patient. And that really is, it works in its more pure form that way. And you certainly get a lot of exposure. It doesn't, if one person doesn't seem to stay with you, don't, it's okay, you'll get another one, and you learn to see what's in you that makes you comfortable with a certain kind of person, and maybe what are some of the things you would prefer to avoid. That's usually a clue to what's going on. Those are the patient's feelings and gives you a clue about who they are. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a hint. So I think we will, excuse me, move on to the Doctor of Psychoanalysis. Oh, and one thing I should mention, if you are in the Master's in Mental Health Counseling and or the Master's in Psychoanalysis, you can go on to further study in the doctoral program. So we call these beginning programs Level A. And if you complete everything and you might want to sit for the license, you can do that sort of in addition to continuing on to the doctoral program, which we call Level B. So in the pure Doctor of Analysis, Psychoanalysis program, you are really doing Level A of the Master's and kind of through Level B. But you have a different, more in-depth training. You are doing more and eventually through the part of the training you're doing more research, you are writing a dissertation, and you're still doing some of the same things. You have the same kind of supervision, but you are working more with one person, and then as you become identifying who you want to write as your thesis, as your dissertation, you have more of a 411 supervision, which is more intensive. And we talk about writing the dissertation. You have to, there's several requirements to get to that, but you choose a case that you are working with, and the model that we use for the dissertations is a single case study. So you are really talking about a case that you have been working with for quite a while, something that you're curious about, and you have a research question, and then you do a very rigorous research study on the patient under question. And you have lots of support with that too. And you're still in classes. Everyone's talking about the challenges they're facing and some of the things that are coming up in this more intense layer of training. When you finish, you are then a certified psychoanalyst, and you also have the doctorate. So we are the only doctorate degree granting program in the country. So it is a very prestigious degree to get, and we do gather people from all parts. We have people that travel from many ways. We have international students. We have people that live locally. But it is a rigorous program, and I'm happy to say we know that people are trying to get the knowledge that they want and get into the field right away. So in the older days, this could take a while. So given that we know the constraints of people's finances and time, we have tried to develop and are launching a new sort of an outtake of the Doctorate of Psychoanalysis program. If a person already has a master's degree in a related field, they can kind of come right into the doctoral level of study. They do not have to start at the master's level. If their master's degree is not in a clinical field, they too can begin at this point, but maybe they need a few linking classes that would kind of shore them up and make sure they have all of the requirements. And I think people are looking for that. I mean, we don't want to rush psychoanalysis because it is such a rigorous and a field that has such depth, but we have to be mindful of the constraints of the current lay of the land with students' desire to get out in the field and also to meet their financial obligations. So I would sum it up in some of these programs by saying that the best thing that you're going to get from these programs is the psychoanalytic informed way of getting all the classes and the process teaching. It is very unique. So while you graduate as a master's in mental health counseling student and you get the license, you may not call yourself a psychoanalyst. You are practicing on a master's level in a psychoanalytically informed way, but you cannot really call yourself a psychoanalyst until you have become the certified psychoanalyst. We had before we got the doctorate, we only had the certificate level, so that was the highest level you could go to, and you would have met all the requirements. But now we have the doctorate, and people do want a little bit more of that kind of feel that you have completed another degree, and it's available and people come. I'll just say a brief blurb about, we have an accelerated doctoral program as well. So these are a group of people that have become already certified psychoanalysts, and they now want the doctorate. So they start off at a higher level because they've done all of these other things. They get some additional training. They do more informed research. They still have to do the dissertation. And we offer that program in a blended way. They can do some of it online, but there is a requirement to come into the school. We do believe, and we understand this idea of technology and distance learning at this point, but we really do believe that the strength of the program is really being in person and being with others and being affected by who you're sitting with, who you're interacting with, both in patient work and in the classroom. So those would be some of the distinguishing effects and impacts of the education, and again trying to understand the current lay of the land. Sometimes people talk about psychoanalysis as being, how contemporary is that? Is that kind of an old way of understanding, and is it an old way of being? And, we don't believe that. And I think, as Dr. Soldz said, trying to apply a lot of these tenets to social change ideas and the current landscape we live in. So you can take this kind of education anywhere. You're applying it to yourself, to others in the classroom, in your outside life, and you're just looking to try to get at what are the underlying factors and motivations in human behavior, and again with the unconscious always being the thing that we're focusing on. People are doing things without knowing it, so we're just gaining more knowledge about really what makes us tick. So the uniqueness of the program, it is sort of a, I think there is a practicality to it. You have a degree, you can go out and earn a living, and it does have that unique psychodynamic approach. And you're in the psychoanalytic approach, that you know how people are operating at the deepest level. It provides the tools required to work successfully with a very broad range of people. I think you will find in some of the other programs you're dealing with a diverse range of clinical presentations, but I don't think you're really getting at this deep level of primitive functioning with psychotic patients, and some of the skills and the way you need to be able to sit with them to understand how they're communicating. This nonverbal communication, there's very primitive levels of communication that are happening without words. And you're trying to understand by vis-a-vis yourself what's happening in you, what's really happening in the patients. And you will learn to understand what these concepts are and what are the techniques with which to work with them. Psychoanalysis does have a theory of technique, so I mean we're understanding in an academic way and in a sort of a book way, but we're also understanding it in a process way. So it will help you gain a fuller appreciation of your own emotional dynamics to help you understand others. Provides more clinical training and supervisory hours. I can't highlight the supervision enough. I think the supervision is incredible, and these people that are providing the supervision, the faculty and graduate students that have graduated and now on faculty, they're doing the same kind of thing that you're doing, the young learner out in the community. And we have people of all ages. We might have young students, but we have people of older ages too, and still doing all kinds of work out there. And so they have their finger on the pulse. They know what's going on in terms of the challenges that clinicians are facing. 94% of BGSP master's degree graduates are either employed in the field or pursuing a higher degree. And we hope again that they're maybe going on to doctoral study at BGSP, and if not, they're going on to other graduate programs in addition and trying to learn some more. So I think that's a pretty high percentage, and I think we're doing well at making sure that they have places to go once they complete their training. So what do clinical students do when they graduate? Well, they work in clinics, many establish private practices. One thing I forgot to mention, when you're in the level B program, we have a therapy center right in the school, and we require that you have at least 3 patients throughout the course of your training. And of those 3 patients, you're going to pick one to focus on as your single case study research. But as you're in the therapy center, it's kind of giving you a real practice, direct practice at keeping patients, understanding how to work with them in a sustained way, and oftentimes that can link right up into a private practice upon completion. So you get kind of the prerequisites right there, and many people are doing that. In my time here, I think people are doing that even earlier than they had before, which I think speaks to the training that we're giving the students. They feel very confident and capable to be out there, and they're getting much more feedback in addition. We have them working in hospital programs and schools, and some of we always talk about evidence-based practices and outcome measures. I think there's clear proof that we're making a difference in some of the ways we're dealing with some of the problems people are noticing. So that should only probably grow as our students are out there even more. And again, hopefully they're entering maybe doctoral programs like something at BGSP. The clinical faculty are practicing psychoanalysts working with a broad range of people and problems. And again, as Dr. Soldz had said, some of the faculty that are going to be in his program are very well versed and experts in their field, and I think we have a distinctive and long-standing list of resumes from all of the faculty in terms of scholarship and writing and research and practice wisdom. And they're very generous. They share what they know, and you begin to really they're pivotal in terms of getting through the program, in terms of your own learning about yourself and learning how to be a very good clinician. supervisors and clinicians at mental health agencies they're working in, and they're running school-based programs or substance abuse programs. And even before, some of my fellow students, based on their training, can even do some adjunct work at colleges. They can do some basic psychology classes. And I think that's, again, people recognize in the community that we have some things that are of value. So we have the clinical faculty, and we also have students that are functioning in very high roles. So we learn from each other. And I think that's it. So I will hand you back to Dr. Berman, and she'll go through a little bit about the admissions process. Thank you.
There's another question, excuse me. How many students are there in a class usually? Actually, that's a very good question. In the beginning of the studies, the classes tend to be a little larger. And when I say large, I mean no bigger than 15. So it's going to be like 9 to 15 people, 10 to 15 people in a class. Rarely does it go over that 15. That's going to be the largest class you'll have. And the class is different than most classes. It's not taught with a professor up front with a PowerPoint presentation like this, lecturing. It is much more process-oriented, a word that Dr. Benson used frequently, and the students are in charge of their learning process, and what they bring into the room after they read materials is how we learn. What is it that's interesting? How is it processed in the room? What's going on in the room that can inform the academic reading? It's a very live and dynamic learning experience. And the class size, therefore, needs to be kept small in order to promote that kind of experience. All right, I guess I'll just dive into the admissions process itself. It's pretty straightforward. I think we have one of the easier, we don't have an online application. It has to be mailed in or handed in, but it is an easy application. We do not require GRE. We do not require a specific GPA. We only have an application form. We do require your transcript, 3 letters of reference, a 1-page statement of interest, a writing sample, and the application fee. Once someone hands all that in, we review the materials, and if it looks like the applicant is qualified or equipped to handle what we believe is master level or doctoral level studies, then we invite that candidate in for 3 interviews. The interviews are absolutely the backbone of the admissions process. It's a way for you to meet us, and it's a way for us to meet you and to get a feel for whether or not this would be a good fit. Both of us should be evaluating that seriously. We have a rolling admissions process, so once you hand in, let's say, all your written materials, maybe it's next week, then we would review them once they come in, and then we would see if they qualify for the admission, for the interview process. We don't wait until all applicants are in, and then we review all the applicants, and it doesn't work that way. It's rolling. As it comes in, that's how we work with the applicant. The admissions deadline for spring is November 15th. Our spring class starts in February, even though that's not really spring. We wish it was, but it's not. But we call it spring anyway. And so that application deadline is November 15th. It's coming right up. If you feel you would like to apply and have not yet gotten your materials in, you can start. If everything's not in by November 15th, we will still work with you. Fall admissions deadline is May 1st. Our fall semester starts in September 2018. There's a question. And the question is a long one. I noted that modern psychoanalysis is very somewhat different from that of Winnicott, Beyond, so on in treating patients. For example, I heard a modern analyst can threaten a patient if a patient threatens an analyst first. It looks so hard. Is modern psychoanalysis able to integrate with other perspectives of psychoanalysis? Well, you're bringing up something that we actually didn't talk about, and I'm glad you're bringing it up. We are a school of modern psychoanalysis. And with that, as Dr. Benson mentioned, there is a theory and there is a technique. But I must say that we also, in our classes, don't just focus on the readings of the modern psychoanalytic community. We do read Beyond, we do read Winnicott, we do read Klein, we certainly read Freud. So to that extent, it is an integration of psychoanalytic theory that you will be privy to. And I hope that addresses that half of the question, although Dr. Soldz, I think, has something else to add.
Yeah, I wanted to say that in fact, it turns out that modern psychoanalysts are actually very similar to people, to Winnicott and Bion especially, and people who sort of are from those traditions, and modern analysts tend to have a lot in common in how they treat patients and talk together regularly, etc.
It's a good point, and that addresses the second part of the question. I think maybe this idea about aggression is interesting because we as modern analysts do think about people and their aggression a lot. How we work with that aggression really varies depending upon the patient, the patient's need, and the analyst. So I think that you hit upon an interesting piece of work that we do here, which is study aggression. We don't just study the sexual drive, which is more familiar to many people who are coming from a classical background. We also look at the aggression in a room when treating a patient, but I can't say that absolutely if a patient is aggressive that the analyst then is absolutely going to be aggressive back. It's not a simple formula. And this is the sort of thing we study here, is how to work with a patient that is maybe expressing some aggression in the room. We do take note of it. Okay, so you have our website, www.bgsp.edu. Please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions about the program, the application process. That's my email address. If you're local, you can come in, we can talk personally. If not, we can set up something on the phone. I also want to mention the students here, which I forgot to mention. Now we're at the last slide and I'm mentioning it. But we do make available current students because often people who are applying or interested in school do want to hear really what is it like to be at this place. So if you have a question you want to type in now specifically to one of the two students that are here, I know they'd be happy to answer it. But if you'd like to set up some other time to meet one-on-one with one of our students or graduates, we'd be happy to coordinate that with you. But if you are once again in town, we have other events here at the school. We'd love to see you. We have open houses. We have a lot of continuing education events. They're usually free. We also offer semester courses that you don't have to matriculate into a degree program to take. So if you're on our email list, take a look at what courses might be offered. There's usually one in social justice and one in psychoanalysis, society, and culture. There's usually a clinical course. So you can kind of get a little taste of what we're about before making any sort of commitment that you might not be ready to make. So unless there are any other good questions, because I think the questions were very good today, you can ask a bad question too. All questions are good. But, oh, there is another one. I am Korean. Must my English fluent to follow a class? Well, we do require I don't know whether you're already in a degree program in the United States. If you are and you're going to graduate with a bachelor's or a master's in the United States, we don't require a proficiency exam. But if you are Korean or from another country and have not studied in a degree program in the United States, we do require a TOEFL, and we do have a minimum score requirement on that. So yes, English language proficiency is a requirement. It's a difficult program. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot to learn. So knowing English would help. Any other questions? Okay, with that then, I'm going to thank you all for joining us, and hope to hear from you again soon, and hope that you have a successful way of figuring out where the right place in school would be for you. Okay, bye-bye.